The situation between the US and China is getting very worrying. Donald Trump tweeted last Wednesday that dealing with the rival superpower is a very expensive thing to do, while going on to mention how 100 trade deals wouldn't make up for the losses caused by the plague from China. The situation between the two nations is in danger of spiraling out of control. Trump's comments came after a report in the Global Times stating Beijing is extremely dissatisfied with America's abuse of litigation against China over the COVID-19 epidemic, and the country is mulling punitive countermeasures against US officials, entities, and state officials. Trump even went as far as to say that he could cut off the whole relationship with China, a bold claim that nevertheless provoked great alarm from the markets. A further taste of what is to come as Trump's election campaign starts to really ramp up came on Friday, when a wave of ads referred to Beijing Biden and an intended attack on the Democratic candidate. And this is only May. There's a long way to go until November, leaving the potential for even more heightened language and rhetoric. It seems like blaming China is going to be the number one tool in Trump's election arsenal, something that doesn't bode well for the global economy and indeed the sanity of the markets. However, there was some reprieve on Monday. When asked if the Fed had done all it can do, Jerome Powell stated that there's a lot more we can do. We're not out of ammunition by a long shot. No, there's really no limit to what we can do with these lending programs that we have. This went some way to reversing the losses Powell provoked last week, when the Fed chair appeared to take negative interest rates off the table, instead urging further fiscal stimulus, something that is unlikely to be forthcoming given the fractious state of election year US politics. As investors keep an eye on the US-China tensions and await some monetary juice from the Fed, the economic calendar should provide a bit of distraction. There's a testimony from Powell on Tuesday alongside the building permits and housing starts, before a potentially interesting set of Fed meeting minutes on Wednesday that could give investors a further idea as to when they can expect a bit more monetary policy from the Federal Reserve. Thursday is the blockbuster day for data. After just about falling under the 3 million mark last week, the latest jobless claims reading is expected to show another 2.4 Americans filed for unemployment, pushing the total figure since the pandemic began to sort of a staggering 40 million people. The Philly Fed Manufacturing Index at least is expected to improve from minus 56.6 to minus 40.0 month on month, showing what sort of improvement means in this current landscape. Most importantly, the Flash Manufacturing Index is forecast to creep higher from 36.1 to 37.5, while the services equivalent is expected to jump from 26.7 to 32.6. The Dow Jones finds itself still back under 24,000. It sort of did take a kicking throughout last week, especially because of the Trump-China situation, though it did bounce back very slightly at the end of last week. I think this week its performance is really going to be dependent probably on the Fed and the Trump-China situation once again. If the Federal Reserve does release more monetary policy this week, then that's going to be huge for the markets, given that they've now sort of been plumped into a state of expectation by Powell's latest comments. As for the US-China thing, one errant tweet from Donald Trump is enough to send them lower at the moment. And given that, as mentioned, attacking China and then, I guess, Biden's perceived associations with China or favourable status from China compared to how China feels about Trump, given that that is his number one election go-to, it's very likely to see more attacks forthcoming this week. It'll be interesting to see then how the markets react to that, given that they're in a slightly more positive headspace thanks to Jerome Powell's comments than where they were last week, when they'd also been damaged by the fact that negative interest rates seem a bit of a no-no for the Fed at the moment.